Just talk about that.
Well, I like Just talk about that. The least attendance I ever had at a panel, I was at a convention in Oklahoma City, and George Takei was just finishing his speech. And the announcer says, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, George Takei will now be signing autographs in the back room. For anyone who doesn't want George's autograph, here's Peter David."
Oh, man.
Have you ever seen South Park? You know the character Timmy?
Oh, yeah.
Timmy was one of the three people who were there. He sat there and he was in a wheelchair and he was going like, ah. And he had two people with him, both of whom were German with English as their distant second language. And that was my audience for an hour.
Oh, man.
Fun times. Hey, I kept them entertained somehow. So, wow, this is like actual people. It's cool.
Very cool.
It's getting dark. Is it supposed to rain today?
Yes.
Probably.
Oh, yeah.
Christ. So at 5. Let it rain at 5. I'm fine with 5. Okay. So, let's talk. You're the moderator?
Yeah, hi.
Great.
I'm Jay. I run a podcast called We Got the Geek. I'm super excited to be here with Mr. Peter David.
Happy to be here, too.
Been a super fan of yours since I first read The Death of Jean DeWolf back in 85.
That goes back a ways, yeah.
Yeah, which was a big story for a 15-year-old to read at the time.
Ah, okay.
And you're currently writing Ben Reilly
The
for
Scarlet Spider
for
from Marvel, that's correct.
Now, what attracted you about the character to come write that series?
They said, "Peter, do you want to write him?"
Oh, cool.
I said, "Sure!" You know, regular gigs, so that's always nice. And the more I delved into the character, the more intriguing I found him. I mean, I have to admit, I wasn't that wild about Ben when he first started up to ostensibly replace Peter Parker. Because to me, Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and that's pretty much it. I didn't accept the notion that now we're supposed to become invested in a clone. But, you know, the way that the character was brought back by Dan Slott, and he was evil, except he didn't know that he was evil. But generally speaking, if you're trying to undertake a plan and Spider-Man wants to stop you, generally speaking, that's a good indicator that you're evil. And, you know, the stuff that Dan set up has left me a lot of room to explore the character and really explore what is the nature of heroism versus someone who thinks he's a hero and is actually just doing really evil things. And I've been having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's an really interesting take on the character so far.
Thank
It's
you.
very entertaining, actually. One thing I've always wondered about, back in the 90s, you did this wonderful run on Aquaman for DC.
Yes, I did.
Where you've drastically changed his look and
Yes.
the way he acted. I was always curious, what did DC think about that when you...
Oh, I actually had to sell them on that. I mean,
Okay.
not the long hair and the beard. That was kind of incidental. But I had a meeting with the top editors and with Paul Levitz about the whole Aquaman harpoon change. Because I really wanted to change Aquaman's appearance. Before I came on the book, if you walked into a room, you go, "Oh, hi, Aquaman, how's it going?" After I started it, if you're in an office and this guy with long hair, a beard, and a freaking harpoon on his right hand walks in, you're going to be like, "Yes, may I help you? Please don't kill me." You know, that's going to be your attitude. I wanted to make him more imposing and more intimidating. I thought it was really hilarious a year or so ago when Zack Snyder released the first photograph of Jason Momoa as Aquaman, because the modern day Aquaman fans are going, "That doesn't look anything like Aquaman." And the older fans are going, "No, that's Peter David's Aquaman." Which I was really pleased with that. I thought Jason did wonders with the part, and I'll be very interested to see what happens in the movie. I'm hoping he loses a hand in the movie and gets it replaced with a harpoon. How freaking cool would that be?
That would be fantastic.
Although my name then better be in that little credits thing at the end.
Well, I don't want to hog the conversation. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. David?
Otherwise, you can sit here and chat, and if you hear anything you want to... Oh, okay, there we go.
You wrote an episode for Crusade.
Yes, I did.
I was wondering if you had if you could discuss that, what that.
Oh yeah, writing for Crusade was a lot of fun. I had written 2 episodes of Babylon 5 initially. Now, writing for Babylon 5 was a bit of an adventure in and of itself. Joe Straczynski wanted me to write an episode that would introduce Londo Mollari's wives, those he referred to as pestilence, famine, and death. Although, of course, and everyone kind of chuckles at that joke, although if you think about it, if they are pestilence, famine, and death, what does that make Londo? War. And I wrote my first outline of the story. And Joe said, no, this is too Star Trek. And he wasn't able to articulate what he actually meant by that. And I did another pass on the outline. And after I turned it in, Harlan Ellison, who was kind of like a commentator, a behind-the-scenes person on the show, advised me to read a play or see a movie of the play called The Women. Once I read that play, the characters of the wives snapped into my head, and I now suddenly realized everything that I'd been doing wrong. When Joe said it was too Star Trek, what he meant by that was that at the end of the show, nothing had really changed from the beginning of the show. Everything was exactly the same. And he liked to have development on B5. So he and Harlan got together with me at the San Diego Comic Con. And I was all ready to toss the outlines that I'd done. I knew what I wanted to do. And Joe said, we're going to be spiking the story. We're just not going to do it. And I said, no, it's okay. I know what I did wrong. And Joe says, no, Peter, the story's just not working. I said, I'll write another outline. He said, no, you can't write another outline because you're writing it under WGA rules. You can only do 2 outlines. I said, fine, let me go straight to script. He says, I can't let you go straight to script because we don't have an approved outline. You know, and he says, you'll get another chance. And Harlan's sitting there, yeah, trust him, Peter, you'll get another chance. I'm sitting there going, no, I won't. I absolutely will not get another chance. So the problem was, now that I had the wives locked into my head, the wives proceeded to sit in my head and yell at me because I screwed up. And they wanted me to tell their story. So I asked Harlan if I should just go ahead and write the whole script anyway. And Harlan said, do not do that. I then asked Bill Mumy, my friend who played Lanier. I said, Bill, I'm thinking about just going ahead and writing the script. And Bill says, absolutely do not do that. And then I asked my agent, and she said, under no circumstance should you go ahead and write the script. With these 3 professionals' words ringing in my ears, I went ahead and wrote the script. And I sent it off to Joe, and this is what my cover letter said. DC is pestering me to write for the DC Babylon 5 comic, which you would have to approve anyway. So I'm sending you this script, which is broken up into acts 1, 2, 3, and 4, for what I would like to do with the comic. Since you said you're spiking the story, you won't be doing anything with the wives, so this won't contradict anything. A few days later, I get a call from Joe. It was on September 23rd. I remember this because it was on my birthday. And Joe says, Peter, this is Joe. I got your package. I went, okay. And he says, I thought we agreed that you should not go ahead and write it. I said, well, Joe, you know, DC wanted me to do this. And it's like I said, he says, I don't want this to be in a Babylon 5 comic book. And I went, I'm sorry. He says, I'm going to be producing it. We're shooting it in 2 weeks. And I go, you son of a bitch. And he said, you know, if you want to come out and watch it being filmed, you are invited. So I fly out to Babylon 5, and I'm watching it. I'm watching the show being filmed. And while I'm there, Joe calls me into his office, and Joe says, we have a problem with a script for episode 218. The writer is not getting it, and now he seems to have flaked out into the ozone. Do you have any ideas for a Babylon 5 script? And I immediately pitched him an idea about, based upon shooting incidents with police, which was big news at the time, I said, what about if we have Sheridan shoot a Minbari who is threatening him, but you know, when they find the shooting victim, he doesn't have any gun or anything, and it looks like he just shot the guy for no particular reason. And he said, I said with Garibaldi. I said, what if Garibaldi shoots him? And he said, can it be Sheridan instead? We need a good Sheridan-focused episode. And I said, okay, I can do that. I said, do you want me to produce an outline? And Joe says, no, it's clear that you get the show. Just go straight to script. So I'm thinking, boy, I sure came a long way from just a few weeks ago. And then Joe approached me about writing for Crusade. He told me in general terms what he wanted the script to be about. That this was also going to be big because it was going to be first one where, oh God, I'm blanking on the characters' names now. It's been a while. I can see their faces. Tracy Scoggins played. Oh God. Well, it was going to be first one with these two characters.
Ivanova.
No, not Ivanova.
No, not Tracy Scoggins.
No, I forget the name of her character. But where her character and the lead of Crusade are going to meet up for the first time, and they become involved romantically later. And so I had to have that happen, set up the beginning of their relationship, and have it be that somebody wants to disrupt this conference they have going on. And once again, I did not have to bother with an outline. I went straight to script. And of the 3 scripts that I wrote for Joe, it was the one that had the most minimal changes in it. I mean, when I wrote Soulmates, he changed the denouement of the story in the last act. When I wrote There All the Honor Lies, he changed the entire second half hour. There was this whole subplot with Sheridan taking lessons with the big guy, the one who's actually an angel.
Oh, the Vorlon guy.
The Vorlon guy, right. All of that stuff came from Joe. So much of my story got, tossed aside to make room for that. Which was, I always thought was a shame, because I had a much better ending for that one, because there's this one thing where this Minbari ambassador calls Delenn a freak to her face, and she says nothing in response. But later on, she takes out this ring that she hadn't worn since the very first episode of B5, and wants the guy to confess something to her, some knowledge about what really happened with Sheridan shooting the guy. And she uses the ring, and she's crushing this guy. And he's in agony, and she says, "If you do not tell me what I want to know, I will crush your body." And he gasps out, "But Minbari don't kill other Minbari." And she says, "Yes, but of what consequence is that to a freak?" Which is like my favorite line I ever wrote for her, but she didn't get to develop it. It actually turned into an episode of Murder, She Wrote, which I wasn't that wild about. But you know what? It's Joe's show. And if Joe wanted to make the changes, that's entirely his prerogative. I have no problem with it. My Crusade episode was like 98% mine. There were a couple of lines that were changed, but that was it. And the other really cool thing is, for those who didn't see the episode, which I assume is most people, this guy believed that he was being haunted by the spirit of Joan of Arc. I thought that made sense. Joan of Arc said she heard voices, so be consistent. And every single word that the invisible spirit said to him were things that Joan of Arc actually said. As I was preparing to write it, I was walking through a bookstore, and right by the cash register, there was a little paperback book, Sayings of Joan of Arc. And I went, perfect! And I pulled through it. Every single word that was spoken there came from Joan. I always liked that. That was a fun episode.
Yeah, Ruling from the Tomb.
Yeah, Ruling from the Tomb. It also had one of my favorite lines in which, Tracy Scoggins' character and the male lead are walking down a hallway, and she says to him, "You know what you are?" And he says, "Devilishly handsome." And she says, "A control freak." And he says, "Can I be both?" I like that line. Okay, so that's okay. Now we got lots of people talking. Yeah, over there.
Can you speak some to writing for Young Justice, specifically the episode Secrets, which I think is one of the most emotionally charged episodes of anything ever written.
Okay.
It's amazing. It's
I'm
incredible.
selling it down on my table, so you should come by and buy the script.
Oh, I should.
Okay.
And if you have any involvement in the season 3 of Young Justice that we've all been promised.
I'll answer the questions in reverse. Season 3 of Young Justice, I can't tell you. Now, if I weren't involved in it, I could say, no, I'm not doing it. So the fact that I can't tell you should tell you something, which is a statement I've made hundreds of times, and only one person didn't get it. One guy was going, "So what can't you tell me?" I'm going, everyone else always gets it. I wasn't supposed to be writing Young Justice. What happened was the actress who was cast to play originally Arrowette and then later Artemis put up on her website, "I'm going to be in this new TV show called Young Justice. Here's a picture of my character." And the internet erupted. So did Warner Brothers, because she wasn't supposed to put that out there. They hadn't announced the series yet. So she quickly took it down from her website. But the moment it's out there, forget it. It's there in perpetuity. And I called Paul Levitz. And I said, "Paul, for God's sake, Young Justice, and you didn't call me?" And he says, "Okay, here's the phone number. I want you to call Sam Register at Cartoon Network. If the name doesn't mean anything to you, that's fine. But if you look at pretty much any episode of anything on Cartoon Network, you will see the name Sam Register show up in the credits." I called Sam, and Sam put me together with Greg Weisman. Now, I've known Greg Weisman for a number of years, but I'd never worked with him. And I called Greg, and Greg says, "Okay, Peter, here's the situation. I really have enough writers for the first season, but it's Young Justice, and it's you. So if you want to write an episode, I have one for you." And I said, "Fantastic." He said, "We're going to be doing a writers' meeting in 2 weeks. You can either fly out here, but you'll have to do it on your own dime, or you can participate on a phone call." And I'm going, I'm not going to sit there on the phone and be a voice over the thing during a meeting. That's not happening. So I said, "So you're actually giving me this assignment?" He said, "Yes." So I said, "Fine. I will deduct the money for the airfare of the hotel out of the money I'm getting paid for it. So it's a cost of business, cost of doing work." So I flew out to LA, and I sat in on the writers' meeting. I was very pleased to see they had chosen to give me an episode called Secrets, which introduced Secret, who had been a part of my Young Justice, and also introduced Harm, who I'd created. Cool. So the bare outlines of the story had been already written up by Greg and his associate. The writers' meeting is a customary thing in which they go through like 7 or 8 episodes, and all the writers in the room work together to do what's called breaking the episode. We break it down into its broad outlines of what's going to happen in it. And we did that with my episode and the ones that were coming up after. Bless you. And I went back home and I wrote the Young Justice script, and I had a great deal of fun with it. I sent it off to Greg, and he loved it, and I'm going, great, well, so that was worth it. Interestingly enough, a couple of weeks later, Greg calls me up, and almost like Joe Straczynski says, "The writer for one of our later episodes in that season seems to have flaked out into the neutral zone or something. Can you were there when we broke that episode. Could you go in and write that episode too?" So all of a sudden, I went from we have enough writers to the full season to writing 2 episodes, which was pretty nifty. But yeah, I loved writing Secrets. I had so much fun with that. The interpretation of Harm was more Greg's interpretation. He had a certain way that he wanted the character to speak and handle himself. And I said, "You're the boss." And I wrote Harm to match up with that. It was a bit more exaggerated than I wrote, but nevertheless, it was really nicely done. And they kept my origin of Secret, that she was the sister of Harm and he had killed her, that kind of thing. Her look was not remotely what the TV show was, but that's fine. But the comic book was, but that was fine, and it all worked out great. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Whoa! Now the hands are going. Okay, you.
You talked about like creating the character, and then like about this writing for TV and stuff. Can you comment on the difference between your how you feel about your creative process as someone who's making up something completely from nothing, and then taking on like a job or like some sort of prompt where like you got these things to work with and these things that someone's telling you to do, and how's that different for you?
To some degree, it's not. every character that I write, I invest something of myself in. If I created the character from scratch, I invest aspects of myself. If I take somebody else's character, I reach into myself and find things within me that help me relate to this character. I mean, when you're a writer, you're really putting yourself into all of the characters in some way, shape, or form. It's how we relate to him. It's not really different from the way you guys relate to characters. I mean, when you're going to the movies or watching television, or for that matter, reading a book, you know you're reading about people who don't exist. To some degree, what happens to them doesn't matter in the slightest. It has no impact on the real world. And yet you become very invested in these characters' lives. You mourn if something terrible happens. You go batshit nuts if they die. You know, bring them back. You know, how often do we say, bring this character back? He's dead. I don't care, bring him back. Oh yeah, that's real world. I mean, you know, if your grandfather dies, you don't stand there and go, bring him back! And people are going, what?
Yeah.
You're out of your mind, dead is dead. You know?
But like getting stuff on spec, I mean, sometimes it seems like, I mean, I'm a high school teacher, and I do things like this with my students. Like we have these cards that we write weird stuff on, then we shuffle them up and like, you know, make up stories out of them. And the stuff that we come up with, because it's sort of like thrown at us, is so cool.
Well, that sounds like improv.
It is, but with writing. And
well, I mean, when
it's also like forcing ourselves to like fit within the rules that someone else gives us.
When you're a writer, your mind is wired to always be thinking of ideas. People say, why do you become a writer? It's because not being a writer is not an option. Your brain is in such a way that you see story possibilities in everything. I'll give you one example. I was watching for the first time Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. God help us all.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so there's Superman standing in front of the United Nations, and he says, I'm going to be getting rid of every nuclear weapon in the world. And within a second, the rest of the movie flashes through my head. Because I'm immediately going, oh my God, the UN is going to say, excuse me? You're going to do what? And someone said, I'm going to get rid of all your nuclear weapons. And they're going, they're our nuclear weapons. You can't get rid of them. You have no standing to get rid of them. You're a single individual. And he says, well, I've seen that they are very dangerous, and I feel it's the only thing to do. And they say, you touch one nuclear weapon, and the world is going to declare war on you. And Superman goes, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but it's what I'm going to have to do. And he flies away. And now the world is going, holy shit, we're at war with Superman. We have to find someone to stop him. Who do they go to? Lex Luthor. Suddenly, Lex Luthor is the savior of the world. Because he's going to say, yes, I can handle Superman. I know exactly what I'm going to do to stop him. I just need an unlimited budget. And they say, you've got it. And suddenly, the world is looking to Lex Luthor to save us from Superman. Holy crap! This is going to be the greatest Superman film ever. All of that went through my head in a second. And the next second, everyone in the United Nations goes, yay! Because they wouldn't do that. So that's how my mind is wired. I'm always looking at things and saying, what if this happened? And what if that happened? And you know, that this could be an interesting course to take. Really, when I'm watching TV shows or movies, my mind is always thinking about, well, what if we did this instead of that? That might be an interesting direction to take the story. I really can't shut my brain off. I mean, when I went to see The Sixth Sense, I was like 2 minutes into the film. Bruce Willis is sitting on a park bench, and I turned to my then wife and I said, I bet he's really dead. You know, then we watched the whole film, and I was watching all the little scenes where they had little proof that he was dead, and I picked up, and yep, of course, she's sitting there at the restaurant with only one setting because her husband is dead. Naturally. I mean, you know, it was just so obvious to me. I just do that. It's the way my mind is wired.
No fun on date nights, but really interesting at the grocery store.
Yeah, I suppose. My wife left me. I don't think it was about 6 cents. Okay, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming, Mr. David. Big
Welcome.
fan. You have created so many characters on your many runs on comics. I think, for example, in the Hulk run, the lengthy Hulk run, the Pantheon.
Yes.
I assume those characters, anything new you've put into it becomes the property of Marvel. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct. So obviously you do many other genres as well in your own personal novels. Is it now in the current culture with movies being such huge money makers, is it a disincentive for especially Marvel comic creators to put anything new in there? Because if you have a good idea, Marvel says, thank you, and we're going to make millions off of this, you get nothing. When you could actually take your own idea and put it into a novel. So is it hurting the creative process at Marvel?
I can't speak for every other writer. All I can speak for is myself. And the answer to that is no. I will come up with whatever characters I think will serve the story. I can think of exactly one time that I came up with characters that I thought weren't going to work for the Hulk, and that was when I came up with Saxon violence. And the more I thought about Saxon violence, the more I thought, this is not going to work in the Hulk. It wasn't because I was thinking of, I should take this over to Epic and pitch it as a limited series. No, the characters weren't going to work for the Hulk. If those characters had worked for the Hulk, I would have had Saxon violence in the Hulk and thought absolutely nothing of it. It's, David Michelinie didn't give two thoughts about, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do Venom in Spider-Man because that could be a real kick-ass comic book.
Right.
You know, I mean, my attitude is honestly, if they see something that I did and they use it in a TV show or movie, great. I'm flattered that they thought enough to use it. I really never think about this in terms of lost money.
Okay.
My mind just doesn't go that way.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, back then.
So having had such a huge impact on Hulk, basically taking a failing comic and rebooting it. And
Yeah, and then they killed him. What are you going to do?
And then they killed him. Well, they're bringing him back next month, or they brought him back last month. But being that you've worked in both television and film and as well as comic media, why do you think it is that they haven't been able to really successfully translate that character into the movies? I mean, even in the Avengers, everybody thought he was the best character.
Yeah.
He was largely comic relief, had a couple of good scenes.
I loved when he punched out Thor.
Yes.
Yeah, that was great. Anyway,
But really, both of the attempts at a Hulk movie, standalone movie, failed.
Yeah.
What do you think's missing?
Well, I actually think what was missing was the correct take on the character, which I think they've managed to find ever since they brought in Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
I mean, his Bruce Banner is basically the Bruce Banner that I left in issue 367. The guy who can actually turn into the Hulk at whim. I mean, Infinity War notwithstanding. That the Hulk is another part of himself that he has managed to learn to accept and use. Their personalities are now much more merged than the comic books. I think that if they brought in Mark Ruffalo and wrote a really good story, they could make a really kick-ass Hulk movie. I'd like to see them do Future Imperfect. How freaking cool would Future Imperfect be from Marvel Comics?
Wow.
So I think that they can. I mean, the first Hulk movie was just... I wrote the novelization for the first Spider-Man movie, and when I read that script, I'm going, this is going to make a fantastic Spider-Man movie. When I read the script for the first Hulk movie, I thought, this could make an interesting Ang Lee movie. But, I mean, it's like, the thing with movies is, if you have a great beginning, your audience will follow you anywhere. If you have a great ending, the audience will go home happy. If you have a confusing beginning, a totally befuddling ending, and a kick-ass middle, the audience is going to be, and that was the problem with the first Hulk movie. I mean, it was like they took a whole bunch of writers, put them in a room, and said, okay, we can't have it be that he gets exposed to a gamma radiation bomb and is transformed into the Hulk. The audiences won't buy that. Why the audiences wouldn't buy that, I cannot even begin to fathom. If you're going to see a Hulk movie, you've already bought in. No one's going to sit there and go, he is exposed to gamma rays? That's stupid. You're in a Hulk movie. It's a given. But it was like they said, well, what should we do differently? And they tossed out 5 or 6 possibilities, and the producer said, you know what, those are all good. Let's use them all. And the Hulk's origin was totally bewildering. It's, he exposed himself to gamma radiations, but there were nanobots. But his father used them as an experiment. And well, what the hell, guys? It's just come up with a simple origin. I thought the second Hulk film was an improvement over the first one. Not only was the CGI better, the story was more interesting. But it wasn't great. It was like one of the weaker Marvel movies. Not as weak as Iron Man 2, I thought, but one of the weaker ones. But then he showed up in Avengers, and it was like all of a sudden they knew how to handle him. If they do the Hulk movie now, I bet it kick ass. Yeah.
So as somebody that also works with a lot of other people's characters, do you have stories about like getting negative reactions from creators with what they feel like, what you've done with what they feel is their property?
Well, let's see. I knew that Lee Falk didn't like that I had the Phantom use his guns to shoot somebody. He didn't shoot fatally, he just wounded somebody. I thought that the Phantom used the guns to shoot to wound. Apparently not, he just uses them to shoot guns out of people's hands, which strikes me as kind of stupid. But Lee Falk's the man, so if I'd known that upset him, I would have immediately changed it in the comic book. But Lee never told me that, so I'm a little upset about that. But he never said anything about it. Creators of characters. Jim Starlin loved my work on Dreadstar. As a matter of fact, I wanted to send him the stories I was writing and get his feedback. And he said, no, I don't want to read them in advance. I only want to read them as the comic book. And I went, okay. The only person I ever really got pushback from involving characters I had not created was a guy who worked for Gene Roddenberry named Richard Arnold. Now, he was not remotely the creator of Star Trek, but he was supposedly in charge of maintaining Gene's vision in the Star Trek novels. The problem with that is that Richard was an idiot. I introduced a female character in the comic book to be Kirk's love interest. And Richard said, no, we can't do that. Kirk is no longer interested in women.
What?
Yeah, that was my reaction. What? Are you out of your freaking mind? Kirk got laid in about a third of the episodes. So don't tell me he's not interested in women. There was one line in a book in which I had Riker say, in regards to an unwanted duty, I had him say, I would rather walk border patrol on the neutral zone in my underwear. That line was rejected by Richard, stating it has not been established that our characters wear underwear. And you just are going, what? Yeah, that was pretty much my reaction. Yeah, I changed it to make him naked. Oh God, there's just so many dumb things. The best though was when we sent them a book called Q and Law that I'd written for approval. Usually approval would take a couple of weeks. And we were not getting approval on Q and Law. Months went past, and we were not receiving any responses from Richard. So, it was now going to be only a few months away from when the book was supposed to come out, and Paramount was still not signing off on it. Major Barrett was going to be coming to a convention in my area, and I said to my editor, we have a cover proof, right? And he said, yeah. I said, send me a copy of the cover proof and a clean copy of the manuscript. I'm going to give it to Major Barrett and say, I want her feedback on her character, Loxana, who is a main featured character in this book. And the editor says, if she hates it, we're dead. And I said, we're dead anyway. Let's give it a shot. So I brought it to Major, was sitting there at the Lincoln Enterprises table. I introduced myself, making no mention of Richard at all. I said, this is a book that I've written that's scheduled to be published. And you see, here's the cover and everything. And I'd like to get your feedback on how I wrote Loxana. And she looks at it, she goes, I'm on the cover. I went, yes, you are. She says, I haven't been on the cover since 1991. Wow, I mean, that's a memory for you. And I said, well, read it and let me know what you think of it. And she says, I will read it on the flight home. Apparently she did. Because the next day, she comes breezing into the Star Trek offices and starts raving about this new Trek novel called Q and Law. And have you read Q and Law? And Loxana and Q are in Q and Law. And have you read it? No, I haven't, you know. And she goes into Richard Arnold's office and she says, Richard, have you read this wonderful new novel called Q and Law? And Richard says, why no? I have not read it, but I'll get right on that, Majel. Majel then called me raving about the book and telling me all her favorite things that were in it. Richard, in the meantime, sent us a 3-page memo of things he wanted changed. 95% of the things he changed were things that Majel liked. So, I went through the entire list and I said, no, Majel loved that line. Oh, this line where Riker says, what do you think, Loxana is beating the crap out of him. What do you think we should do? And Worf says, sell tickets. He wanted that line cut. No, Majel loved that line. So we got, that book was like 95% what I wrote, and the changes that we acceded to were absolutely minor and had no impact whatsoever. But other than that, Richard giving us crap over Star Trek, I've never really had any creator upset with what I did, because I always respect either the creator just flat out trusted me, or I respected their voices so strongly that they had absolutely nothing to take issue with. I mean, Stephen King loved my dialogue style when I did Dark Tower. I remember there was one sequence where I was scripting it, where I was looking at the original book, and the sentence that was there seemed kind of grammatically clunky to me. But you know what? It's what Steve wrote, so I used that. When I got back Steve's proofreading notes on the script, he had changed the line. What was his original wording? I said, okay, if Steve has no problem with it being changed, I will have no problem with it either. So, and it was really entertaining. I only got notes from Steve on the first couple of issues, and then he was, fine, go ahead, you've totally got this locked in. So if you can please Stephen King on one of his personal, favorite series, then you aren't really going to have too much trouble. Okay? Yeah, back there.
You've obviously written in a number of different medias, being novels or comic books or script or anything. Are any of them more, do you prefer writing in any type of way?
Every type of writing has its advantages and disadvantages. For me, the purest form of writing is a book. It's me, it's the reader, and there's nothing between the two of us other than the typesetter. So the books, I guess, would be closest to my heart in terms of producing work that impacts on people. And I've been on the New York Times bestseller list, so that's nice. But the books that I've written that are entirely my creations have not been on the New York Times bestsellers list. They have far less exposure than I would like. But when I contribute to the Marvel universe or the Star Trek universe, I acquire hundreds of thousands of millions of more readers. My work gets out to so many people. If I didn't write for Marvel Comics or Star Trek or something, this room would be more or less empty. I mean, let's go see Peter David, the creator of Apropos of Nothing. What? I would have a small fraction of what I have now. So the more the things like the comic books or stuff that is related to licenses or television shows. I mean, I get tons more viewers when I write when I write episodes of Babylon 5. Or some years ago, I co-created a TV series called Space Cases that ran on Nickelodeon for a couple of years. That was filmed right up in Canada, in Montreal. And I had lived in Montreal for a few months. That's a nutty area. It's like, my first day that I was there, they were going to be voting the next day on whether or not Montreal should separate and become its own country.
Oh, yeah.
95.
Right, exactly. What's that?
It was 1995.
1995.
That's right, yeah.
I was driving down one of the main streets, and there were people set up on the left holding signs saying, honk if you're voting yes. On the other side of the street were people with signs saying, honk if you're voting no. I looked at these two, I honked, and everyone went, yay! And I went, okay. None of this makes sense, but what the hell? I love living in Montreal. What was that?
I was just gonna say, who says you can't please all of the people?
Yeah, really. It was just the most insane thing I'd ever seen. Yeah, Montreal, I found I made great use of my high school French. If you want to learn a foreign language or improve on your knowledge, just go live there. Being immersed just improves your facility with the language. I still remember when I got to the hotel, the apartment that they rented for me, and I put on the television set, and there they're running League of Their Own. And Tom Hanks is looking at the ball player who's crying, and he says, "No, ne pleurez pas, on ne pleure pas en baseball. Ne pleurez pas, ne pas plus en baseball." And I'm going, okay, I understand that. Ne pleurez pas en baseball. There's no crying in baseball. You know, it was fun. I totally forgot what the question was. Did I answer the question somewhere?
Yeah.
Yay! No, the guy behind you.
Right.
Yeah.
Layla Miller at the end of X Factor ends up in a very different place than where she started at the beginning of X Factor.
That's an understatement.
And I was just wondering what your original conception of the character was and how that evolved as X Factor unfolded.
Well, my original conception of her was exactly what I had in the beginning, that she was this mysterious girl who knew stuff. Now, I originally wasn't going to have Layla Miller in X Factor. And what happened was Brian Michael Bendis had introduced her in House of M. He wanted her to be an X Factor. The reason he wanted her to be an X Factor was if she continued to exist in the Marvel Universe, then House of M was simply the first appearance of Layla Miller. If she disappeared after House of M, then it would be that she was what. Then it would be obvious that she was what she was, a plot development that Brian came up with to make the story work. Right? So I was perfectly happy to bring her into X Factor, although I made her somewhat different from what she was in her original incarnation. But I had a lengthy phone conversation with Brian, and he was thrilled with all the ideas that I had come up with. And in the first couple of issues, she was this strange little girl. And I was getting angry letters from fans going, what the hell is she doing here? She has no right to be here. She brings nothing to the team. And then I wrote issue 3, in which some guys broke into X Factor headquarters, and ultimately Layla Miller electrocuted him by having set up a chain of events with the bathroom that caused water to come pouring down on this guy while he was nearby an electric wire, and he gets electrocuted. And she walks up to him in the darkened house, and she's got a flashlight that she's holding up to her face. And she says, "Don't worry, you're going to be dead in about 30 seconds. Your wife will not mourn you. Your mother will." And he says, "Who the hell are you?" And she holds it right up to her face, and she says, "I'm Layla Miller. I know stuff." And everyone in America went, "Holy crap." And suddenly Layla went from being a total zero to everyone's favorite character. It's like, holy crap, do not screw with Layla Miller. She will figure out how to take you out. And I put in a throwaway line there where she informed Jamie that she hung around because they were going to wind up getting married. Now, at the time, I had no idea that she was going to be flung into the future. But once we did the storyline where she gets stuck in the future, I went, oh my God, this could actually work. If I have her stuck in the future for 10 years and have her then come back to our time and she's an adult woman, they could get married. And you know, these kind of things happen to me sometimes. I'll toss out random lines because they seem really good at the time, and then later on circumstances change so that I can bring them to fruition, which is why I have this great reputation of setting stuff up all the time. I'm always setting stuff up, and half the time it comes to nothing. But when it comes together, people go, wow, Peter David really planned ahead. Look at this. He put this line here 30 issues ago that set it up. Whatever.
You know stuff.
I know stuff. Well, here's the really cool thing. I brought her back in issue 40 as a grown woman, pretending she was a nun for story reasons I won't go into. And my editor contacts me and he says, "We're bringing back," he says, "You want to bring back Layla Miller?" And I went, "Yeah." And I had some serious arguments with my editors because they wanted, their attitude was, if we're going to bring back Layla, we have to have it be, you know, a big promotional campaign around it. And I said, no. I said, God damn it, this is why we're never able to surprise anyone, because we advertise it 3 months in advance. Just have it. My favorite episode of Hill Street Blues was when Farillo and Davenport got married. They didn't announce it on NBC. They didn't put, "Be sure to see this, you're going to miss Farillo and Davenport getting married." It's just, "Let's get married." Okay, I'm going, whoa! Wasn't expecting that. I wanted to have that kind of surprise. I wanted people to get to the last page of 40 and go, "Holy crap, Layla Miller's back." And I finally convinced the editors into it. And the funny thing was, I was at a convention on an X-Men Q&A panel. And the issue was going to be coming out the following week. And a guy raised his hand, stood up and said, "Are you going to be bringing back Layla Miller anytime soon?" And I didn't want to lie to the guy. So what I said was, "Look, you know Marvel Comics. If we were going to bring back Layla Miller, we'd launch a big news campaign, right?" He said, "Yeah, probably." I said, "We'd let you know months in advance she's coming back." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Have you seen any advertising like that?" He says, "No." I said, "Then that should answer your question." I never lied to him. Never said we weren't. I just spoke to him in vague things, using my own experiences with the editors and my own arguments to convince him that Layla Miller wasn't coming back. I wish to God I could have been there when you read X Factor number 40 and the last page reveals Layla's return. I was so pleased with that. It's one of my favorite endings.
Wouldn't it be horrible, though, if he just decided to quit collecting that comic? He's like, "Oh, she's not coming back. I guess I won't get next week's issue."
Yeah.
That was one of the best X questions I ever got. The best X question I ever got was a guy who wanted to see Jubilee come back. Or get her own, Jubilee get her own series. And he was wearing this ghastly Hawaiian shirt. And he says, "I will do anything if you bring back Jubilee." And I said, "Would you burn that shirt?" Oh. He said, "Absolutely." And he started pulling out a cigarette lighter. He's like, "No." Did I offend you? You're leaving.
She really likes Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, really. Okay, anything else, guys? Yes.
A lot of Star Trek fans have always wished that the Star Trek novelists could write some episodes, and I wondered if you had ever considered that.
I actually did consider it. As a matter of fact, I met with Ron Moore, and I pitched an idea to him, which he really liked, and I wrote up an outline, which they paid me for, and then they spiked the story, and they said, "We're not going to use it." Interestingly enough, and I don't remember specifics, but interestingly enough, 2 or 3 elements from my outline showed up in subsequent Star Trek episodes. So, you know, thanks a lot, guys. So that was my one attempt. That and Major Barrett tried to convince them to make Q and Law into an episode. They would not make Q and Law into an episode. The reasoning was it was already a book. And of course, in the long history of television and movies and stage plays, no one's ever adapted a book into a different medium. Jeez Louise. Yeah, and then you. Yeah.
That's a little off topic. I was just curious, what made you decide to become a writer? And did you go to university or?
I went to New York University. Yes, I got a degree in journalism, which I then proceeded to not use. One doesn't decide to become a writer. One becomes a writer because there's no other option. You have voices in your head speaking to you with such intensity and indeed ferocity that you feel compelled to write their stories down and then get them out there to as many people as possible in formats with your name as large as possible because you're that much of an egotist. Becoming no one sits around going, "I really should learn how to come up with ideas so I become a writer." It's the other way around. You come up with ideas and then write them down because you have to. It's why your brain is wired. I may be sitting there at home and I'm staring off into the ozone layer and my wife says something to me and I don't respond, she immediately knows I'm not there. My mind is off somewhere in a writing zone. And then I will snap back to attention and go, huh? And she says, what were you working on? And I will immediately, I was working on Scarlet Spider. I was coming up with a plot for the Zorro novel I'm writing. You know, that kind of thing. By the way, I'm writing a Zorro novel. I've written a Zorro novel. Cool. It'll be coming out. You see, you have to understand, Johnston McCulley created the character of Zorro for a one-shot story called The Curse of Capistrano. It was not supposed to be more than one story. Indeed, at the end of the story, the big reveal was, oh my God, Don Diego Vega is Zorro. I did not see that coming. And everyone in the town knew that he was Zorro, and that was the end of it. And then Douglas Fairbanks optioned it and Douglas Fairbanks Sr. made a very memorable movie of it. Suddenly, Zorro was a huge character, and everyone was going back to McCulley going, we need more Zorro stories. And so McCulley, who had written himself into a corner, wrote himself out of the corner and produced something like 51 more Zorro stories. And an outfit called Bold Venture Press has been publishing all of those stories. And they came to me and asked if I'd be willing. This year, it's some damn anniversary of Zorro's. I can't remember which one. It might be 100 years. And they wanted me to write a Zorro book, which I wrote. I wrote an original Zorro story. And they said it doesn't have to be long, like 55,000 words. And I wrote the story, and it was 50,000 words. And I said, okay, I need to write something to fill this out. And I came up with a short story called, in which basically it's having young Diego Vega, 10 years old Diego Vega, meeting Baron Munchausen. And the story is written first person by Baron Munchausen, which is why Diego Vega winds up in a sword battle with Hades. So, because, you know, once you've got Baron Munchausen narrating it, you can throw reality right out the window and have a lot of fun. That'll be coming out in July, I think, so be sure to get it. Okay, now, I said you. Yeah, you.
I was just wondering if you could talk about the Return of Swamp Thing book.
Return of Swamp Thing book? Sure. Okay.
They're making like a returning Swamp Thing.
I heard somebody say something along the lines of, if you wanted a good Swamp Thing movie, read the book.
That's true. They sent me the script for the Return of Swamp Thing. I signed on to novelize it. I think it was my first movie novelization. And I read the script, and from the beginning of the script, I started to get a headache. By the end of the script, I was bleeding out of my eyeballs. It was terrible. It was absolutely ghastly. And I thought to myself, I can do one of two things here. I can either just write he said, she said, and publish it under a fake name, because I don't want people reading this thing and thinking that's the best I could do, or I can take the gloves off and try and fix it. And I decided to do the latter. Now, since I was very early on in my career, I didn't realize I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do. You're supposed to just stick to the script, not bring your own improvements on it. I mean, a good example of that was that Max Allan Collins was hired to write the novelization of Road to Perdition. Road to Perdition was based on his graphic novel. So if you're going to have anyone write the novelization, it's going to be Max. It's going to be Al Collins. And Max put in all kinds of additional stuff into the novel that he didn't have room for in the graphic novel. All kinds of background information, side plots, subplots. And the movie producers read the novelization and said, you have to take out all this additional stuff. And the publisher's going, it's the author of the graphic novel. If anyone has the right to put this stuff in there, it's him. And they said, we don't want anything that wasn't in the movie. His novel, and he wound up having to take it all out. His novel went from being 80,000 words to 50,000 words. You know, it was nuts. I didn't know you're not supposed to do that. But I did it. I took out scenes that just didn't work. I changed scenes that were in there so that they were different, but they work now. I added characters, took out characters, and completely changed the ending of the story. And I wound up lifting a sequence that Alan Moore did in the comic book, where the Swamp Thing takes out the bad guys by becoming an entire mountain range. I thought that was really cool, so I put that into the book. And I actually worked in the names of the various creators who'd worked on Swamp Thing, putting them in as subordinate characters into the book. Because, I figured if I'm going to be using their stuff, I could at least use their names in the comic, in the novel. And I set it off. I sent it to the publisher, and the publisher sent it to the movie producers, a guy named Michael Uslan. You may have seen his movie on pretty much any Batman film, because he owns the licensing rights to Batman. And Michael read over my manuscript, and Michael's exact words were, "My God, I wish we'd shot this." And the movie came out. The movie was already done. They couldn't go back and put my changes in. And the movie came out and was ghastly, and the novel came out and it was well received. And indeed, they were doing a DC panel at a New York Comic Con, and the panel was asked, "What did you think of the Swamp Thing movie?" And Bob Greenberger said, "Skip the movie, read the book." And that book, as awful as the movie was, pretty much launched my career on writing novelizations, which they don't actually seem to do anymore. Novelizations seem to have tapered off. I mean, everyone's concerned about security. The security on them has changed tremendously. When they sent me the Swamp Thing script, they stuck it in an envelope and sent it to my house. And here it is. Then when they would send you scripts, it would have code numbers on it, so that if you tried to sell it, the code numbers would trace back to you. Then they did away with code numbers and printed your name on each page of the script in huge grade letters. I looked it up and it said David in huge grade letters, which again, being egocentric, I loved. David, all right, baby. Then they stopped sending scripts altogether, and you had to come to the publisher's office and make a copy there. Then they did away with that, and you had to come to the publisher's office and write the book in the publisher's office. Or at least write down or retype the script in the publisher's office. I remember I did that with one of the Transformers movies. The old saying, "I know this like the back of my hand"? I typed from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a 20-minute break for lunch. At the end of the day, I looked at the back of my hand and I went, "What the hell is that?" Because there was like 1,000 little capillaries had come to the surface of my hands that are ordinarily there, but you don't see it under normal circumstances. But in this case, they were all over the back of my hand. I'm going, "Well, that's new." It was just nuts. But yeah, I went totally off topic. I'm sorry. Anything else, guys? What time is it? I have the slightest idea.
2.
Oh, that's
It's 2?
That's time.
1 minute to 2? God damn, I'm perfect. All right. I'm down in Artist Alley. I'm all the way over against the far wall. Go to Jim Steranko's, which is real easy to spot. I asked Jim, I said, "Do you have 10 gray suits? Or do you just have one set of clothing?" Because I've never seen him wearing anything other than that gray suit at any convention. It's the funniest thing. Yes, so go to Jim Steranko's booth, hang a left, and I'm right down there. I have scripts, teleplays, one of my most recent books called Artful. Have any of you seen Artful? Okay, here. I'll talk fast. I was reading Oliver Twist, and I start to notice some things about Fagin. He never comes out during the daytime. He never eats anything. He never drinks anything. Bill Sykes even calls attention to that and buys him a drink, which Fagin then doesn't drink. And at one point, Fagin is described as having no teeth except for a couple of fangs, like a dog. And I'm reading all this, I'm going, holy crap, Fagin's a vampire. It's all there in the book. And I wound up coming up with Artful, in which the Artful Dodger learns of a vampire conspiracy in London. His only allies to try and stop it are a teenage girl who says her name is Alexandrina, which it is, but her full name is Alexandrina Victoria, and she's an ex-queen of England, and an 8-year-old Dutch boy who says he knows everything there is to know about vampires. His name is Abraham Van Helsing. Because if you look at the timeline, Van Helsing and Dracula would be about 8 years old at the time of Oliver Twist. So I figured, what the hell, why not? So I came here with 20 copies of that book. I got 3 left. And I got other stuff, and come on by.
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for watching the Convention Junkies coverage of the 2018 Niagara Falls Comic Con. Please like, comment and subscribe to see more, and let us know below what you think of this video. If you would like to help us with future projects, please visit our Patreon page.